It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind where the silence feels almost too still, as though the walls are listening. I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing the same coffee mug for the third time. I wasn't really cleaning it. I just needed something to do with my hands. Tom was out of town again. Another business trip, another cold hotel room, another set of polite texts and phone calls that felt more like check-ins than conversations. I had stopped waiting up for him months ago. We had grown used to the silence between us. It had become a kind of language, one where nothing was said but everything was understood. We were coexisting, not living. The doorbell rang. I dried my hands quickly and walked toward the door, glancing briefly at my reflection in the hallway mirror. My hair was tied up in a messy bun, a soft knit sweater clinging to my shoulders, sleeves pushed up to my elbows. I didn't expect company. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Jason Miller, the boy next door. Except he wasn't exactly a boy anymore. "Hi, Mrs. Carter," he said, holding out a hardcover book with a smile. "I think this belongs to you." And blinked. The Great Gatsby. I'd loaned it to him nearly 6 weeks ago, back when he was helping his mom clean out their attic before leaving for college. I remembered him mentioning he wanted to read something classic but not boring. "Oh, right," I said, taking the book. Our fingers brushed just for a second. "Thank you, Jason. I almost forgot you had this." He gave a light laugh, eyes warm but sharp, a combination that surprised me. "It was good. A little tragic, but I get why you like it. Would you like to come in for a minute?" I asked almost without thinking. "I just made some tea." He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. Why not?" We sat in the living room, me on the corner of the couch, him in the armchair across from me. I poured him some chamomile, setting it on a coaster in front of him. The air between us was easy at first. Polite, familiar. "You've done something new in here," he said, glancing around. Smiled. "New curtains. Just needed a change." Jason nodded. "It feels cozy. Warm." He looked older than I remembered. More confident. His voice had dropped. His jaw was more defined. He spoke thoughtfully, with that slightly rebellious undertone that came from being young enough to question everything. "So," I asked, sipping my tea, "how's school treating you?" "It's okay," he said with a shrug. "Lots of pressure. Everyone expects you to have it all figured out." "You don't have to," I replied more quickly than I meant to. "That's the lie they sell you. Nobody really has it figured out." He looked at me for a moment, more deeply than I expected. "I guess you're right." We talked for longer than we should have. About books, about life, about how strange it feels when people stop really seeing you. I don't even remember how we got there, only that the conversation felt honest, unfiltered. I told him how I used to write once. Nothing serious, just little stories I kept in a notebook. He asked why I stopped. "I got busy," I said. "Or maybe you stopped because no one encouraged you to keep going," he replied. That struck something in me. Something I hadn't touched in years. I gave a soft laugh, trying to shake it off, but it lingered. The room fell quiet for a beat too long. Then I noticed it. Jason watching me. His eyes scanning not with disrespect but curiosity. Admiration, maybe. "I always thought you were different from other adults," he said. "Different how?" "You actually listen." That comment shouldn't have made my stomach twist the way it did, but it did. I looked away, fiddling with the edge of my sleeve. The air felt heavier now, like we both knew we were treading into unfamiliar territory, but neither of us wanted to pull back just yet. He leaned forward to pick up his tea, and I reached to pass him the sugar bowl. Our hands met again, this time not by accident. The touch was light, but it lingered. His fingers were warm, his skin soft against mine. I didn't pull away. Not right away. And neither did he. Finally, I cleared my throat, withdrawing my hand and looking down. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "That was..." "No, it's okay," he interrupted. "Really?" He stood up slowly, finishing the last sip of his tea. "I should probably go. My mom's expecting me." He nodded. Of course. He walked to the door and I followed behind him. I could feel the air change with each step he took away from the living room, as if something had entered that space with us, and now it was leaving too. He paused at the doorway, his hand on the knob. Thanks for the tea, he said, turning his head just slightly. Anytime, I replied. When he left, I didn't close the door right away. I stood there, watching him walk down the steps, across the lawn, and back to his house. It was nothing. Just a boy returning a book. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. But the truth was, something had shifted. A line had been approached. Not crossed. Not yet. But close enough to see it. The next morning, I found myself staring out the kitchen window, watching the Miller house across the street. It was something I hadn't done in years. Not since Jason was a boy riding his bike up and down the driveway, laughing without a care in the world. Now, I found myself wondering whether I'd see him again. Or if I wanted to. I told myself that what happened, or almost happened, was nothing. A moment, a flicker of emotion, a passing touch. But lies have a way of repeating themselves in your head until they start to sound like truth. That weekend, I ran into him at the grocery store. He was standing in the produce aisle, holding a bunch of bananas and looking vaguely confused. Emily, he said, surprised. Hi. It was the first time he had ever used my first name. Hi, I said, smiling without meaning to. Having trouble deciding on potassium. He laughed. I don't know how to pick a ripe one. I usually just guess and regret it later. Talk. Nothing serious. Just groceries and school and how small the town felt sometimes. But when he smiled at me, really smiled, it felt like a secret was forming between us. A subtle shift, like a line being redrawn in sand. A few days later, he knocked on my door again. This time, it was to return a screwdriver he had borrowed from Tom months ago. Another small excuse. Another perfectly timed coincidence. Need help with that garden light? He asked casually, gesturing to the porch. I saw it flickering last night. It wasn't broken. Not really. Just loose wiring Tom hadn't gotten around to fixing. But I nodded anyway. Sure, I said. That would be helpful. He spent the next hour on a ladder, tightening bolts and rewiring cables. I watched him from the kitchen window, focused, confident, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was different from the boy I remembered. And I was different too. Not in the way I looked, but in the way I felt when I looked at him. When he came inside to wash his hands, I offered him lemonade. We sat on the porch together, the golden hour light stretching long across the lawn. It felt like the whole world had gone quiet just for us. You always seemed so put together when I was younger, he said, sipping from his glass. I smiled faintly. That's what people do. They put themselves together when others are looking. Jason turned toward me, his voice low. Do you still write? I blinked. No, not anymore. You should, he said. You have things to say. I can tell. There was something unsettling in how seen I felt. Not in a threatening way, but in a raw, unfamiliar way. Like he wasn't looking at who I used to be, but who I really was. Later that evening, it began to rain. I had just finished folding laundry when the lights flickered, then went out. Beside, Tom was still out of town, this time in Chicago, and I wasn't in the mood to deal with power boxes in the dark. 10 minutes later, a knock came at the door. It was Jason holding a flashlight. Figured you might need help, he said. Houses on our side of the street are out. I let him in. We went down to the basement. He opened the fuse box, flipped a few switches, and the lights returned, at least partially. But the living room stayed dim. Candlelight seemed easier. I lit a few, setting them on the coffee table. Jason sat across from me, damp from the rain, hair tousled. You always keep candles around, he teased. Romance or survival? Take your pick. He chuckled. Maybe both. We sat in silence. Rain tapping against the windows. Flickering light casting soft shadows. He looked tired, but not in the way college makes you tired. It was something deeper. Familiar. Are you okay? He asked. He looked at me for a long time before answering. I don't know. I think I'm trying too hard to be who everyone wants me to be. Join the club, I said softly. It never gets easier. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You ever feel invisible? All the time, I thought. Yes, I said aloud. More than I want to admit. Eyes met. And that silence, the one full of everything unsaid, stretched out between us again. This time it felt dangerous. He reached out, hesitating only once before brushing a strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered. I didn't stop him. You're not invisible, he whispered. Not to me. It was a moment I should have broken. A gaze I should have turned away from. But I didn't. I let it hold me there. Then he kissed me. Softly, carefully. Like he was asking a question I'd already answered. Kissed him back. Just for a second. Just long enough to forget who I was and who he was. Long enough to feel wanted. Long enough to remember what it felt like to feel it all. When I pulled away, breath shaking, I stood up quickly. This is a mistake, I whispered. Jason nodded, standing too. Maybe. But it didn't feel like one. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He left quietly. I locked the door behind him, then leaned against it, heart pounding. In the silence that followed, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just stood there, staring into the dim light of the candles. What we did, what almost happened, wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. But it wasn't accidental either. It was something else entirely. And I knew, even then, that the line we had flirted with was now behind us. We hadn't just approached it. We had crossed it. The next morning, I woke up alone in a bed that didn't feel like mine. The sheets were twisted around me. The room still smelled faintly of rain and skin and something I couldn't quite name. For a moment I thought maybe I had dreamed it. That the kiss, the touch, the moment of heat and collapse was all a vivid fantasy I would shake off with a warm shower and a clearer head. But then I saw the note on the kitchen table. Folded in half. Jason's handwriting. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things harder for you. Last night meant something to me. But maybe it shouldn't have happened. There were no other words. Just that. I stood there for a long time, holding it between my fingers, rereading every line until the ink started to blur in my eyes. What does it mean to be sorry for something that felt real? Something that made you feel alive for the first time in years. The guilt came next, like a cold wave that starts at your feet and creeps slowly up your spine. I didn't cry. Not right away. But there was a deep ache in my chest. Not just for what I had done, but for what it revealed about who I had become. Tom came back 2 days later. He walked in through the door with his usual stiff smile and travel-weary posture. A brief kiss on the cheek. Luggage dropped in the hallway. A list of complaints about delayed flights and bad room service. The usual script. He didn't notice the silence in my voice. He didn't notice the way I avoided his eyes or how long it took me to answer simple questions. And in some twisted way, that hurt more than if he had noticed. Because it meant I could disappear in front of him, and he still wouldn't see me. We went about life as if nothing had changed. Dinners were quiet. TV filled the spaces where conversation used to be. We shared a bed but not a connection. Not really. Jason didn't come by anymore. Not that I expected him to. I'd see him sometimes, walking to his car, unloading groceries, jogging through the neighborhood. He didn't look at me. And I didn't call out to him. But the silence between us spoke louder than anything we could have said. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of him in his driveway, talking to a girl. Someone his age. Blonde. Laughing. She touched his arm the way I had once. I watched them from behind the curtain and felt something sharp in my stomach. Not jealousy exactly. Something more complicated. Regret maybe. Or the realization that I was just a detour in someone else's story. Days passed. Then weeks. The weight of what I'd done settled into my bones like winter. I couldn't tell anyone. Not a friend. Not a therapist. Certainly not Tom. I carried it alone, folding it into the corners of my routine until it became part of me. And yet, even in the guilt, there was this small, persistent truth. I didn't regret the feeling. I regretted the consequences. The risk, timing, person. But not the feeling. Not the moment when someone looked at me and truly saw me. One evening, Tom came home early with takeout and a bottle of wine. He was trying in his own awkward way. I knew that. And I played along, smiled, laughed at the right times, said thank you when he told me I looked beautiful. But it all felt hollow. I kept thinking, if he had said this 6 months ago, 6 years ago, would it have mattered? I began writing again. Late at night, when the house was quiet and I could hear myself think. I didn't write about Jason directly. Not by name. But the emotions found their way onto the page. The ache of being seen. The fear of being forgotten. The way desire can feel like drowning and breathing at the same time. One morning I donated a box of books to the local library. The Great Gatsby was on top. I held it for a moment before letting it go, running my fingers over the worn spine. It was a beautiful story. Messy. Tragic. Just like mine. As I drove home, I passed Jason's house. He was outside watering the plants. He looked up just for a second. Eyes met. And this time he didn't look away. There was no smile. No wave. Just a shared, heavy silence. A goodbye that didn't need words. I didn't stop the car. Some stories don't get closure. Some don't need it. They live in the spaces between what happened and what could have. Between right and wrong. Between impulse and intention. When Tom asked me if I was okay that night, I told him yes. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't the whole truth either. But it was enough. In the end, I didn't confess. Not because I didn't feel remorse, but because saying it aloud wouldn't undo anything. It wouldn't erase the night. Or the loneliness. Or the months and years that led up to it. Some stories don't belong on shelves. They belong in locked drawers, whispered in late-night journals, buried in soft candlelight and quiet guilt. What happened with Jason was never just about Jason. It was about me. And the woman I became while no one was watching.